Head to Subway for the tangy new Tuscan Chicken Melt, seasoned chicken, melted cheese, and olive vinaigrette. With 9 grams of fat, it's part of a Subway Fresh Fit meal. A simpler way to enjoy eating better. Hurry in today. Subway. Eat fresh. The B.S. Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the B.S. Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The B.S. Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The B.S. Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the B.S. Report. Our old friend Ric Bucher is on the line. He's going to cover the finals for ESPN Radio, and he's on the Subway Fresh Take hotline right now, as always, by cell phone, because he refuses to respect my landline rules. How's it going?
Landline is so freaking 1980. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, but we're going to interrupt each other. You're going to hear me late.
My cell phone is actually better than my landline. So I'm respecting the audio fidelity that you're used to on the podcast that we heard so clearly on the Mark Cuban interview.
Yeah. That was, the hotel room phone. We've solved that problem. We have equipment now to solve it. Are you surfing right now?
No, but I just finished surfing.
Oh, good. What a life you have. I want our next reality series to be A Day in the Life of Ric Bucher, and where you just you're like the Swayze character in Point Break.
No, I'm not even.
You're searching for the next big wave. You rob banks, and you work for ESPN.
Yeah, pretty much. And I wear a lot of masks. I wear a lot of different masks. Yes.
Let's get into it, because we have exactly 35 minutes to finish this podcast.
Exactly. And why do we have 35 minutes? Who am I being preempted by?
Well, no, we have the logo. We're taking the logo as well.
Let me give you one tip on interviewing the logo. Interviewed the logo before?
No.
Have you? You never have.
Nope.
One tip: make sure that your first question is a good one, because it may be the last one that you get in.
Wow. Okay.
Mr. West.
It's a lot of pressure.
Ability to carry a conversation all by himself, and it's all good, but he doesn't need much help.
That's why they called him Mr. Clutch, because he could carry a podcast by himself. Officiating.
There you go.
You and I disagree about officiating. I made my case last week on ESPN.com with my article about how they need to fix the referee problem. You say that it's a little more unfixable because the athletes have gotten too fast and too quick. Explain.
I'm not saying necessarily that it's unfixable, but first of all, I feel that we're blaming the referees themselves. We're saying they're incompetent. And they've been put in an impossible situation. One, the athleticism from top to bottom has become greater. When you talk about the absolute upper echelon guys, you could argue that we've always had the Jordans and various big men down through the history. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had to be difficult to officiate.
Mailman.
Go on down what's that?
The mailman, Karl Malone, had to be ranked right up there.
Absolutely. But the difference is that from 1 to 350, everybody's bigger, stronger, and faster. And you can't underestimate the impact of the brawl. I believe that it was almost like David Stern took one of those haymakers that Steven Jackson was throwing down, and he's never been quite the same. And so you've got guys that are quicker, bigger, stronger, more difficult to officiate, and now David wants to have absolutely no possibility of anything remotely happening similar to what happened in Detroit. So on top of it, now he's asking the referees to officiate them in a tighter way than it ever has before. And so the combination puts these guys in an impossible situation. And this is the basic thing. Since the Detroit brawl, David has basically put the whistle in his own mouth. That's why all this stuff goes to the league. And you notice we've had all these technicals and we've had all these flagrant fouls, and they're rescinded or they're changed or whatever by the front office, and yet there's no repercussion. You know why? Because the league would rather have you call an over-the-top flagrant or technical, and if it quells any possible uprising, they're okay with that. We'll go back and fix it later, but we just want to make sure that there isn't any sort of a skirmish. And in one sense, I can't blame them, because how much life did that Detroit brawl have? And I still argue that in baseball and football, there's far more stuff that goes on that should leave a black eye on those leagues. And for some reason, it doesn't the way it does the NBA.
Well, I mentioned the overreaction to the Artest melee in the column that I wrote, and I didn't really go into the racial ramifications, mainly because, it's 2009, and I guess maybe I was being naive thinking about it like, well, it's not the days of Kermit Washington anymore. It's not 1977 where you have a black guy nearly killing a white guy, and that's a much bigger deal back then. It almost killed the league. Nowadays it's 2009, and I just don't feel like that black-white kind of thing really fits in as much as it did. But then, a few connected NBA people who read that column, they pointed out to me that the angle that I didn't go into enough was how terrified Stern was after that Artest melee because of the racial implications, because you had two black guys running into the stands and punching white fans. And he basically made the decision, I never want that to happen again. I never want to open the door for that potentially ever happening again. And we're going to overreact now. And if it compromises the competitiveness of these games, so be it. That's the gamble I'm taking.
It's exactly right. And there's one thing we could say here as we look at the finals with the Lakers in Orlando. For all of the officiating, the questionable calls and the mistakes that were made, the glaring mistakes that were made, and I still hold to the fact that the guys are no better or worse. In fact, I think they're better than they were 10, 15 years ago, measurably better than they were 10, 15 years ago. It's simply that we've got 20 camera angles, we've got slow-mo, we see every single game, we see every single minute of every single game. There were so many games that we weren't aware of back in the day because you didn't have access to them, and you didn't see the bad call replayed on ESPN 75 times a day. So I really believe that it's more a matter of emphasis. And the other thing is, after all is said and done, do you feel like we're not seeing the right two teams in the finals, that we're not seeing the two teams that earned their way to being in the finals?
Yeah, that's a fair point. By the way, I'd also throw in high-definition television into your, pointing out that bad calls are even worse calls than you thought because we have better pictures now and we can see if somebody shoved whoever or whatever. I agree. The Lakers
better pictures, and those cameras are also in our face. I mean, they're courtside, they're close up, and I believe that's aside from the racial issue, that the problem is that it's just you're in confined quarters with really big guys swinging, and that looks a lot more violent.
Let's go back to the racial thing, though. I still believe, and I argued this in the piece, maybe I didn't argue it strong enough, I still think that was the perfect storm of crazy. You had arguably two, and I know you love Captain Jack, but let's admit that he can get a little carried away.
Oh, no question.
Two of the five, you had Artest, the single probably craziest guy in the league. You had Detroit, one of, the tougher fan bases in the league, arguably top three. And then you had Steven Jackson, who, if you're going to pick any teammate who is going to charge into the stands after a teammate to get his back, you would pick Steven Jackson first out of anybody in the league. And I just I don't think that set of circumstances is ever going to happen again. I really don't.
I agree with you. I can't never say never. Don Nelson was hired 3 times, so there's always a possibility of something. But I get that, and to be honest, this is the difficulty with David taking more of a hand, and people in around the league will tell you this too, is there's so much that he has done positive for the NBA, and I would say, as much as he manipulates the game of basketball at times, that he's done for the game of basketball, and he's certainly done for pro basketball. His legacy is intact. But David isn't a basketball guy. Like, he doesn't have a feel for the game. Because if he did, you can look at certain situations and you can say, you know what? That's not going to escalate. That's just competitive fire. Yeah. Or that guy shouldn't be getting beaten up for what he did, because that's just part of the game. It wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't trying to show anybody up. He was in the moment. And there are too many decisions that are made. Again, I'll even go back to I always go back to this, the Phoenix San Antonio, Amari Stoudemire and Boris Diaw coming off the bench.
Right.
They weren't going to do anything. There wasn't anything happening there. And so there was a miscarriage of justice because you were so adamant about enforcing a rule that you lost sight of, but what does this do to the competitive spirit of what we have? And that's where, if there's one failing that David has, in my mind, it's that he is overprotective and it steps on the game. And
well, I suggested
you're like me. The game should always be first and foremost.
Yeah, and also both of us played basketball, and we know that that's part of the game. You get mad at each other. Stuff's gonna happen, and that's just the way it is. And I just worry about with Stern, with with the fact that he's proactively trying to prevent stuff from happening. Yeah. Where are we going to be 10 years from now? Where does this go? I already feel like the competitiveness is being compromised in some ways. And as I pointed out in the column I wrote, the flagrant fouls are going up, not down. So if these flagrant fouls were supposed to be meant as a deterrent, it's not working. It's actually leading to the same kind of physical play, only it's choppier, and I don't even feel like the players know what they're doing half the time.
Well, that's the problem. And actually, I think I would hope that in 10 years they would have it straightened out, because this is still in its infancy. And this is where I defend the referees. Every year they're getting a different message as to how they're supposed to officiate these games. In fact, it's not even every year. It can be from month to month.
How about series to series?
Fair enough. And so when you have instincts, I believe this was the case with the Mark Wunderlich call on Melo and Antoine Wright. 5 years ago, you don't call that foul because the standard was as the referee, you don't want to decide the game. And so he's not going to be watching for a touch foul and immediately blow his whistle in case that Melo can go to the line and win that game. It's, you know what? I'm going to let you guys play unless it's really egregious. I'm going to let it go. Well, now that's not the rule. But if you're in the moment, in that quick split second, and you got to make a decision, their instincts are being watered down and driven in all sorts of directions. Again, it makes it really, really hard because they're constantly having to recalibrate. It'd be like somebody telling you, okay, you're writing this column this week. Okay, now we want you to write 100-word blurbs. Now we want you to do a hard news story. You would never get in a rhythm and be particularly good at any one of them because you'd be trying to relearn your craft.
Yeah, well,
maybe not you, but most of the writers out there.
Well, let me ask you about, I had about a bunch of different suggestions about tweaks we could do, and one of the main tweaks was the NBA right now rules everything in black and white. You're suspended for a game. Yep. You're suspended for 2 games. You did this. Like, the Rafer Alston slap on Eddie House, a perfect example. Why couldn't he have been suspended for the first half of the next game? Why couldn't Stoudemire and Diao have been suspended for the first quarter of the next game in 2007? That's what I don't get is they're approaching this in a very totalitarian way. I don't know what the word would be, but just how about working with it? How about working with each situation and trying to figure out what the best solution is versus these are the rules and this is the suspension and here's how it is. Yep. I don't get it.
I'm all for that, but to be able to do that again, you have to have, and this is why I believe that they fall back on the rules and they take this hard line on, well, that's the way the rule's written, and so we just have to enforce the rule because there's no feel for the game. You could only do that if you can look at the situation and interpret it and understand that, you know what, I've been in that position. I understand what he meant by that. I mean, there are things that they don't even catch that are not penalized at all that are far more dangerous, that are far worse things. Yeah. I could even argue Dante Jones, pushing the back on Kobe Bryant, which did not even receive a foul, if I'm not mistaken. To me, pushing a guy in the back when he's in the air is one of the most dangerous plays you can make. There's all sorts of bad things that can happen.
Yeah, that and another one that sometimes doesn't even get called. Perkins does this a lot. Dwight Howard does this a lot. The moving screen where you set your leg a little far out to trip the guy. Yep. Somebody's going to blow out their ACL on that screen at some point.
That or just the thigh, the knee to the thigh that we've seen guys hampered by that, and they haven't been the same for the rest of the series. So,
well, what do you think about a couple readers suggested this? Why not 4 refs instead of 3, and then everybody gets a zone? Because one of the things that we keep hearing is, every guy referees under the basket differently. Joey Crawford's going to call everything. Some other guys are going to let stuff go. So why wouldn't we just have it so that you have 4 refs instead of 3? 2 of them are under the rim and moving up to midcourt or back. They basically go horizontal, and then the other 2 guys are basically just running the sidelines. And that's your game. And now the players know, all right, Crawford is under that basket, and I know this is going to happen.
Right.
That just seems like it would make sense. 4 referees, you're not going to miss anything. They can maybe work together. Why not?
It's an interesting proposal. You're still going to have 2 different referees under the respective baskets, but if they maintain that order, then you would get one guy for one half, and you get the other guy for the other half. I could see that. Essentially, the way it's supposed to work now is that the crew chief is supposed to set the standard for how a crew is going to officiate.
Yeah.
That the 2 other guys are supposed to be sort of subservient to how he decides that the game is going to be called, and he doesn't decide unilaterally. I mean, they usually have a conversation, but the crew chief usually comes with, hey, you know what? This is almost like a coach on a team or the leader of a team. Hey, this is the way we're going to run this play. That's the same way. What's interesting is that when you get to the playoffs, that's when you are taking your best referees and you're putting them together as crews, and you can have a conflict in personalities because you can have a guy who calls it one way and a guy who calls it another way. And just as an aside, one guy that I don't know that gets enough credit is really overlooked, but I've just over the last couple of weeks has been pointed out to me, and I think is correct. Mike Callahan might be the best referee in the league right now.
I'm with you. He's definitely top 3. It's good to see him in a game.
Just because you forget that he's there.
Yeah.
And not to take anything away from Steve Javie or some of the other guys that are at the top, but they've you know when they're reffing a game. And Mike Callahan, you often forget, and you don't look and go, oh, that's the crew chief. You really forget sometimes, and to me, again, that's a hallmark of a really good referee. The other thing that scares me with the league is this no penalty for LeBron James on not showing up after the game.
Yeah, like a favored son syndrome.
Like we're so afraid of upsetting our cash cow that the rules are different for him.
Yeah,
I cannot see how it would be, how anybody else would avoid some sort of fine or punishment. And I'm sure they've talked to him. I'm sure they said, but you can't, there's just no way you can do that. There's no way you can do that.
I'm with you. Although I still support what he did. It reminded me of the 80s.
What?
I'd support it. It reminded me of the 80s when teams actually hated to lose to one another and you didn't have to hug each other for 10 minutes after every game.
You know what? I'm good with that, but not showing up after the game and leaving Mo Williams and Delonte West to handle answering questions about why this came apart.
Well,
that's unacceptable if you're the leader of the team.
As a reader pointed out, and I'm using this joke in my basketball column this week, maybe LeBron just wanted to see if his teammates could help him out with one thing in that series.
You know what? I don't. Hey, if LeBron had accepted the challenge of guarding Hedo Turkoglu, then I would say all bets are off. You can make that case.
Oh, please. Hey, nobody did more in a 6-game series on both ends than LeBron James did. That was an unbelievable superhuman performance.
He was mediocre defensively.
Yeah, but he had to be. They were running every single play through him. How is he going to have the energy to play on both ends when every play runs through him?
He's got to become a more efficient player.
Stop it.
It's not that every play runs through him. It's that it takes him so much energy with anything that he does. Look at how Kobe scores 40 and how LeBron scores 40.
Yeah, but Kobe's 7 years older.
Okay, I'm not saying that he should be any more that he shouldn't be where he is. I'm just saying don't throw it all on his teammates and say LeBron is perfect and he's getting no support. If LeBron had a post-up game, he would create more space and time for Delonte West and Mo Williams to get shots off than penetrate and kick.
It's a great point, but hold on, though. We've argued about that. He's only 24. You got to cut him some slack at some point. Jordan didn't have that fall away until he was 30.
No. I give him slack until people put all the fault on his teammates. And I go, wait. His teammates are what they are. I'm not looking at his teammates and going, they could be more than they are right now. You can't look at one of those guys and say, you know what? I've seen him do this. He didn't do this in that series. There isn't one guy you can say didn't do what we know he is. The one guy that we know who can do more, and he may not be able to do it more, but he can do more as he gets better, is LeBron. And this is my own look. It's so crazy because he's the most amazing thing about him is he's operating at maybe 70% of his capacity
as a player.
And he's as a player, and he's throwing up triple doubles, and he's winning MVP, and he's doing these amazing things. I give you all that. I love watching him play. I love how he's developed. I love how he took what he learned with Team USA and carried it into this season. But all that said, when you're not showing up for press conferences, when you don't have a post game, when you have to expend so much energy, when everything is a dribble drive and takes 12, 13 dribbles to set up, you're not there yet. And for people to suggest that he is, or that we should be putting him in the pantheon of the great players in the league, not yet. That's all I'm saying. Not yet.
Well, I think he's there. I think you missed one crucial point, and I totally disagree with you on one thing. His supporting cast in the first 3 games played as bad as they could play. Their shooting percentages were like in the 20s and the 30s. They missed open shots. That's the main reason they blew two or 3 20-point leads. I can't even remember if it was 2 or 3. But if those guys make open shots and do their job, that's the only thing he's asking for them. He's asking Ilgauskas to make the 18-footer and for the guards to make threes. They are up 2-1 or maybe even 3-0 in that series. And they didn't, and Orlando gained more and more confidence. And if Stan Van Gundy has shown one thing, he's shown that as the series goes along, he can make the necessary adjustments and, come up with a couple wrinkles. Whereas, like, you saw over and again, Mike Brown, Doc Rivers, Nate McMillan, Rick Adelman. These guys, they just do the same thing every single game in a series, and I don't think you can coach a playoff series that way. I really don't.
The problem is when you get to a playoff series, I would have liked to have seen Cleveland try a couple of things when it became clear that you're down 3-1. And they did they did somewhat, but
they did. What'd they do?
Yeah, he played much more small ball, playing LeBron at 4 and putting Verjao on Dwight Howard.
I would have suggested that in Game 1, by the way.
Well, you know what?
You really needed Game 1 and 2 to find out that Zydrunas Ilgauskas wasn't going to be able to jump out of Rashard Lewis. You needed those 2 games to learn that lesson.
I would say more that you're going to have to go to that direction because your other pieces aren't going to work. And I can't speak in specifics. I just know that in my experience, because I've had the same reaction that you've had in various situations where I've gone, why aren't they doing this? Why don't they try this? And when I've had an opportunity over the summer at Summer League, whatever, to catch up with the people making these decisions, and I can get them one-on-one and say, why didn't you try this or why didn't you do this? And you know what? There's always really good reason. There are things that they know about a particular player, or whether it's from practice, whether it's over the course of games, whether it's their attitude and how they react when you change their role, another guy that you're bringing in, and I look at it and I go, okay. You know what? And here's the thing: these decisions are never made without a basis of knowledge that isn't readily available to us, and they're not going to throw guys out there and say, you know what? I didn't do that because this guy can't do this, or because we know this about this guy. He's not going to do that with his guy, but I guarantee you there are reasons behind it. And so that's
I would agree with you.
My mild defense here for totally changing things up. Some of it is because guys want to keep their job, and if you stayed with the tried and true, it's more easily defended. As some people say, you can win the press conference.
That's the point I was going to make. I think these guys, it's safer for them not to roll the dice and not to change things up.
In some cases, I will agree with you, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case in every instance, and especially when you're getting to the postseason. And I'll even say this: if they are a little bit scared, you know what? I can't blame them. I mean, Mike Brown, for all you want to say, Mike Brown's team went to the freaking conference finals, and people are questioning whether he's going to keep his job. Byron Scott, his team made the playoffs. He was in danger. I don't know that he still is. Might still be. Was in danger of losing his job. Certainly Byron's on a short leash this year. But it's just, you know what? When you want to maintain your livelihood and the line that you have to walk is that thin, it's awfully hard for me to blame them in having a little self-preservation.
Well, the Avery Johnson 2007 example is the ultimate example of why you don't want to proactively change what was working. But I don't think that's necessarily the case all the time. And I also think, I really wonder if coaches are almost too close to it sometimes. They're doing so many different things. Yeah. Like in round 2, I'm watching my favorite team, the Celtics, who had no business beating Orlando and somehow had a lead in the last 4 minutes of Game 6.
Right.
I'm watching that whole series going, I hope and pray that Stan Van Gundy doesn't realize until Game 8 that he should be playing Michael Pietrus and Courtney Lee all the time, and that J.J. Redick is absolutely idiotic to be playing at all in this series. And in Game 6, the light bulb went on. He started playing the right guys, and they destroyed the Celtics down the stretch, and they destroyed them in Game 7. And
but Courtney Lee was injured in that series, wasn't he?
He came back for Game 3. And as soon as Van Gundy put him on Eddie House was done for the series. That was it. I don't think he ever even attempted another field goal. And I just think sometimes these guys are too close to it and they don't realize. And I think a really good example is Mike Brown in that Orlando series. I don't know what would have made him think that he could not play either Pavlovich or Serbiak in that series. You cannot guard Hedo and Rashard Lewis with 6'1" guys.
I would agree with that, but both of those guys have warts. both of those guys.
Good. At least they're tall.
Not good, not necessarily good decision makers. Yeah, but you know what? Just the matchup may look good on the court, but if the guy is killing you at the offensive end and taking shots he shouldn't be taking, or is not rotating, and you know what? I mean, neither one of those guys is known for their defensive prowess, particularly Wally. I thought Wally actually did a stand-up job when Richard posted him up. I mean, he gave you what he could.
I thought that was a mistake. I also thought, I just assumed, the reason I picked Cleveland was I just assumed they were going to not double Dwight Howard, single team him. They have 30 fouls to play with. Use your fouls. Stay home on the shooters. And that's how you beat Orlando. And I think that's why I think the Lakers are going to beat Orlando. I think they're going to be smart enough to do that. I don't know why Cleveland would do it.
I would say that the Lakers are smart enough to beat Orlando, but I will say this too. I haven't forgotten how I felt about the Lakers going into the finals last year. Yeah. And there were some key guys who failed to show up.
Yeah.
And
you don't like Odom.
And I need to see that they understand where they are. And I just, guys don't change, and that scares me a little bit. The one other thing, you're talking about bringing in Zerbiak and Pavlovic, the other element there is, and when we saw it, they had shooters who could not get into rhythm. Well, you bring extra guys into the rotation, you're taking away shots, you're taking away minutes, and you're also saying to them subliminally, we don't think you can get it done. And depending on what the makeup of Mo Williams, I'm not worried about Delonte West, but the makeup of Mo Williams, you may have lost him for the series. And do you really want to do that before you go, you know what, I got no choice? Because you're not getting it done, and I'm not going to be around to see whether you are or not.
Explain to me this. How does Hedo Turkoglu go through two straight playoff series, 13 games in all, without anybody exposing him for being one of the top 5 worst defenders in basketball? How does that happen? Have we all failed as a society when nobody's just saying, hey, on a playground, people point to Hedo Turkoglu and go, clear out. Hedo's on me. In a playoff series, he's allowed to just run around and nobody exploits him. I don't understand it.
I don't know that I would say that he's that bad. Again,
he's terrible.
Guys who at least don't quit on a play. And
he couldn't guard you.
What's that?
He couldn't guard you.
No, at 6'9", and as long as he is, I don't think I got the quicks anymore to get around him. Trust me.
Hey, wait a second. We have 2 minutes, so I got to ask you this real quick question.
All right.
Are you confident? Because we got to go back to the officiating thing for one big thing. Are you confident that the NBA cares enough to change the fundamental things they need to change, which, as I pointed out in the column, they need to really start spending money on developing referees. They need to realize that you can't trot out 59 and 65-year-old guys in playoff games. Do you think they care?
I think they care, but I think they care about the appearance rather than the reality. And I love the idea of an academy. I love the idea of experimenting with 4 refs. I love all that, because at the end of the day, I want to see something that works and that truly works. And I'm just not convinced that the NBA, I think the NBA looks at it and says, if it looks like it works, we're good with that.
But it doesn't work.
Their belief is we can keep tinkering with it. I would say that the league disagrees with you by and large.
They're wrong. Not only they're wrong, but I don't think they really appreciate what a huge issue this is. Not just for diehard fans, but casual fans.
I'll go back to the same thing. We are now at the NBA Finals. Do we have the right 2 teams in the NBA Finals?
We do.
So the league can always say, you know what, it works. We got problems, and we get things highlighted. And, part of it is you got people, I mean, even our broadcasters are questioning calls. Charles is questioning calls.
Yeah.
We got former players and coaches questioning calls, and they're wrong. They're wrong. But because they are a former player or coach, because they have a platform and there's no immediate response to what they're doing, then you have that. You know what the league could go a long way toward doing is have Bernie Fryer on a telecast to answer any question that comes up.
Well, they like to pretend, but they like to pretend that bad calls never happened.
I have a problem with that too.
Yeah.
The 95% right.
Yeah.
I'm just not buying that because you know what? There's about 20% of them that even they will tell you there's a gray area. It could go either way. So they're counting all those. They're counting all those in their favor, and I just don't know that that's sporting.
Are you working the NBA Finals for ESPN Radio?
I certainly am. I will be sideline. I will be behind both benches. I will be going solo with Mike Tirico, Hubie Brown, and Jack Ramsey as our three-man booth, which is the first three-man booth for ESPN Radio ever, as far as I know. And
as far as I could tell, the oldest three-man booth, I think, in the history.
I was just going to say, I think I'm there to balance the age demographic as much as anything else.
Hey, are you gonna tweet during the finals games?
Yeah,
I
hope to. I hope to get my BlackBerry up and running and be able to throw in a couple of as my tweeters told me, or my Twitterers, Twit Nation, whatever you want to call them.
Tweets.
I said I'll be giving you some nuggets from behind the bench. Oh, they jumped all over me. They said too soon.
Oh, that's funny.
So I will be working my magic behind the two benches.
And that's it. You can get that at Ric Bucher. That's right. Is your Twitter address?
Nope. No space.
I'm really excited for Kobe to win the finals, and instead of running toward one of his teammates or his coaches, he runs toward you for the man hug. I think that's how it plays out. I really do.
You know he's hitting up the family.
All right, you're going to be second. Ric Bucher, thanks for coming on the B.S. Report.
You got it.
So I get % off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the B.S. Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
That concludes, ends, finishes, wraps up another BS Report. With all the talk about baseball, the upcoming football season, and hockey playoffs, Bill Simmons neglected to mention something which frankly cannot go unstated. Okay, here goes. For a limited time, hurry into Subway and enjoy the new Tuscan Chicken Melt. Lovely seasoned chicken, melted bubbly cheese with olive vinaigrette, piled so high with the crisp veggies you love on your choice of freshly baked bread. All that deliciousness with 9 grams of fat. It's part of a fresh fit meal.